Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at Bitcoin, and we're actually using a pretty cool source for this one. It's actually a resource that is supposed to explain Bitcoin to kids. But even though it's made for a younger audience, I think we're both going to learn something new today.
Absolutely. I think approaching complex topics in a way that makes sense to someone with no prior knowledge can be really insightful. It strips away all the jargon and forces you to focus on those fundamental principles.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, with that in mind, what is Bitcoin? I mean, you probably have some idea.
Yeah.
But for the benefit of anyone listening who's totally brand new to this, what are we talking about when we say Bitcoin?
At its core, Bitcoin is a form of digital cash. It exists outside the control of banks or governments. It's really a revolutionary way to send and receive value directly peer-to-peer.
And the source that we're using today uses this analogy. It says that Bitcoin is kind of like the coins that you earn and spend in a video game. So just imagine that. But the twist is that these digital tokens, they actually have real-world value.
Yeah, and that value is derived from a really fascinating interplay of factors, things like scarcity demand and utility. We'll dive into all of that later.
It is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Just numbers on a screen that have real-world purchasing power.
And speaking of mind-blowing, can we talk about the creator for a second? This whole Satoshi Nakamoto thing, I mean, nobody even knows who this person is, or group of people, or whatever.
Yeah, it's so intriguing, right? It's like this almost mythical origin story for a technology that's potentially, reshaping the entire financial landscape.
Oh, totally. Okay, so Bitcoin, this revolutionary digital cash, why did it even come about?
Well, to understand that, we have to go back in time a little bit. Think about the world in 2008. We were in the midst of a major financial crisis. Trust in banks had completely evaporated.
People were losing their savings, their homes.
Yeah.
It was a really rough time. Yeah, a total crisis of confidence. And, Bitcoin emerged from this climate of disillusionment. It was almost a direct response to the perceived flaws of the traditional financial system.
It was like people were looking for a better way.
Exactly, a more transparent, accountable, and equitable way to manage their money.
Yeah, so it was more than just, a new technology. It was driven by a need.
Precisely. And one of the core principles behind Bitcoin that makes it so different from traditional currencies is the concept of decentralization. Instead of relying on a central authority like a bank or a government, Bitcoin operates on a distributed network.
Oh, that makes sense in theory.
Right.
But how does it actually work in practice?
Uh-huh.
This is where the blockchain comes in, right?
Exactly. The blockchain is the ingenious technology that underpins Bitcoin. You can think of it as a giant shared digital ledger, a
Yeah.
public record of every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever been made.
Yeah.
And here's the key. Instead of being stored in a central location, this ledger is distributed across a network of computers worldwide.
So like everyone has a copy. The source we're looking at. It compares the blockchain to a shared notebook that everyone has access to. Anyone can see the transactions, but no one can cheat or alter the records.
It's a great analogy. The blockchain's transparency and its immutability are crucial for ensuring trust and security. Because every transaction is verified and recorded on this public ledger, it makes it virtually impossible to tamper with or counterfeit Bitcoin.
So the blockchain is like this unbreakable chain of records that
Yeah.
guarantees the integrity of the whole system. I get that. But how are new Bitcoins created? How do they get added to the system? That's where miners come in.
You got it. This is where things get a little bit more technical, but I promise it's worth understanding.
Right.
So miners are basically specialized computers that compete to solve very complex mathematical problems.
Our source compares it to solving a puzzle to earn a reward, which I kind of love.
Yeah, it's a helpful way to think about it. So essentially, miners are expending their computing power to validate and add new transactions to this blockchain. And for their efforts, they're rewarded with newly minted Bitcoin.
So that's how new Bitcoin comes into existence.
Precisely. We call this process mining.
Oh, that's starting to make sense. So we've got this decentralized system, this unchangeable record of transactions, and these miners that are constantly working to maintain it all. But I still have this one big question. Why is Bitcoin worth anything? I mean, these are just digital tokens. They're not backed by gold or government decree or anything like that. So why do they have value in the real world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why are these strings of code suddenly valuable? Even the source we're looking at today, it asks, why are numbers on a screen worth anything at all?
Yeah, it seems so counterintuitive. But obviously something is giving Bitcoin value. What is it?
Well, it's not just one thing, it's a combination of factors. First, there's the scarcity principle. Unlike traditional currencies, which can be printed endlessly, Bitcoin has a limited supply. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in existence.
Whoa. Only 21 million for the entire world. That's wild.
Right. That built-in scarcity definitely contributes to its value.
It makes it feel exclusive.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you also have this element of belief and demand. Much like with gold or fine art, Bitcoin's value is influenced by how much people believe in it and how much they're willing to pay for it. It's a self-reinforcing cycle.
So as more people buy into the idea, the price goes up.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a social phenomenon as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's driven by this collective belief and market forces.
Interesting.
But then there's also a practical dimension to it as well. There's the utility factor. Bitcoin offers a really fast, secure, and global way to transfer value without needing intermediaries like banks.
Yeah.
And this utility, this ability to just bypass traditional systems and to move money quickly and efficiently across borders, that definitely contributes to its value as well.
So we've got scarcity, belief, and utility. All these things working together to give Bitcoin its real-world worth.
Exactly.
It's pretty fascinating.
It really is. It challenges our traditional notions of what money is and where value comes from.
Absolutely. But before we get too philosophical, let's talk about the practical advantages of actually using Bitcoin. I mean, what are the real-world benefits here?
Well, for starters, there's that decentralization aspect we talked about. Because Bitcoin operates independently of any government or financial institution, it gives individuals a lot more control over their money.
Yeah, that's a huge draw for a lot of people, especially those who are skeptical of centralized authority. Or who just want more financial autonomy. It's like taking your financial destiny into your own hands.
Yeah, exactly. It's about empowerment.
And then there's the speed.
Oh, yeah. Bitcoin transactions are super fast and efficient. Our source compares it to sending a text message. And I think it's a pretty accurate analogy.
Really?
Yeah, especially compared to traditional bank transfers, which can take days to process. Bitcoin transactions are almost instantaneous.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's a game changer for sure.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really appealing for both businesses and individuals.
For sure. And then, of course, there's the security aspect. Bitcoin transactions are secured using cryptography, which makes them incredibly difficult to hack or forge.
So it's like having a digital vault for your money.
That's a good way to put it. And you can access this vault from anywhere in the world.
Nice.
And then finally, there's the accessibility factor. Anyone with an internet connection can use Bitcoin, regardless of their location, their background, or their financial status.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's like breaking down those financial barriers.
Exactly.
Creating a truly global and inclusive financial system.
That's the idea.
Bitcoin has a lot going for it.
It does.
Welcome back, everyone. So last time we really dug into what Bitcoin is, how it works, even who might have created it. And I got to say, I'm even more fascinated now than I was before.
It's kind of infectious, isn't it? The more you learn about Bitcoin, the more you realize how much potential it has to just disrupt everything.
Totally. And that's what I'm really curious about now, the impact. Like we talked about, the advantages for individuals. But how could Bitcoin change the whole financial system?
Okay, well, that's where things get really interesting. Remember how we talked about Bitcoin being decentralized?
Yeah.
That's not just a cool technical feature. It's like a fundamental challenge to traditional finance.
You mean how banks and governments have always controlled money?
Exactly. Like for centuries, we've relied on these centralized institutions to issue currency, process transactions, set interest rates. They've always been the gatekeepers.
And Bitcoin is like, nope, we don't need gatekeepers anymore.
Exactly. Bitcoin offers this alternative where transactions just happen directly between people without needing those middlemen.
So it could make finance more efficient, more transparent, even more accessible to everyone.
Exactly.
It's like taking power away from the big institutions and giving it back to the people.
I like that, yeah. And that shift in power, it could be huge EE, especially for people who have been excluded by the traditional system.
Like folks in developing countries who don't have access to banks.
Yeah. Or anyone who's just wary of governments controlling their money.
That makes a lot of sense.
For those people, Bitcoin could be totally life-changing. It gives them a way to participate in the global economy on their own terms.
It's really empowering when you think about it.
Absolutely. It's all about control.
Yeah.
But of course, with any big shift like this, there's going to be pushback.
Oh, for sure. We're already seeing concerns about regulation. And people talking about how Bitcoin could be used for illegal stuff.
Exactly. Which, some of those concerns are totally valid.
It's like any new technology, right?
Ah.
Especially one that disrupts the status quo.
Yeah, there are always going to be growing pains.
So it's about finding that balance.
Exactly. We need to foster innovation, but also make sure we're using this technology responsibly.
Okay, so we've talked about finance, but how could Bitcoin impact other parts of society?
Well, think about something like charitable giving. Imagine being able to donate directly to people in need, with no middlemen taking a cut. And you can see exactly where your money is going.
That'd be amazing.
Right. Bitcoin could revolutionize philanthropy.
And because the blockchain,
Yeah.
all those transactions are recorded permanently,
Mhm.
so donors could actually track their contributions,
Yeah, it's built-in accountability.
which I think could really increase trust.
Absolutely. And beyond philanthropy, Bitcoin could also play a role in promoting financial literacy.
Especially among younger generations.
Exactly. They're already so comfortable with digital technology.
Yeah, they practically grew up with it.
And by learning about Bitcoin, they're not just learning about this one specific thing, they're learning about how money works in general.
Yeah, that's really
That's
cool.
like a gateway to financial empowerment.
I like that.
And that knowledge can be really valuable, especially in communities that haven't always had access to traditional financial services.
Yeah, it's about leveling the playing field in a way.
Right.
So Bitcoin is disruptive,
Uh-huh.
but it can also be really empowering.
Definitely. It's a powerful tool.
It's a double-edged sword, I
And
guess.
I think that's a good way to put it.
But I think the potential benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But it's important to approach it with open eyes, to be aware of both the potential and the limitations.
To be informed,
Yeah.
to be cautious,
Right.
but also to be open to the possibilities.
Because we're really just at the beginning of this whole thing.
It feels that way. Like Bitcoin is still in its early stages.
Yeah, but it's already having a big impact.
It's crazy.
It's fascinating to watch it all unfold.
It really is.
Like we're witnessing the birth of a new financial ecosystem.
And who knows what the future holds.
Right.
Maybe one day we'll all be using Bitcoin.
Or maybe something even better will come along.
The possibilities are endless.
That's what makes it so exciting.
So we've covered a lot of ground again today.
Yeah.
From the nuts and bolts of how Bitcoin works to its potential impact on finance and even society as a whole.
We've talked about the challenges and the opportunities.
The hopes and the concern.
And we've even started to touch on some pretty philosophical questions.
Like, what does a decentralized digital currency even mean? What does it say about our values, about the future of money, about the way our society could work?
Big questions.
And those are the questions we're going to be tackling in our final part.
All right, so we're back. And, we've talked about what Bitcoin is and how it all works. We even talked about like the pros and cons and the potential impact and all that. But now I kind of want to get into the bigger picture, like the philosophical stuff. What does the existence of Bitcoin even mean?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, isn't it? Bitcoin kind of forces us to re-examine some really basic ideas about value, about control, even about like what society could look like.
For as long as we've had money, it's always been governments and banks in charge.
Right.
They decide how much money exists, what it's worth, all of that. But Bitcoin just throws all those rules out the window. Exactly. It's like for centuries, we've just accepted that we need these centralized institutions to manage our financial systems. But Bitcoin comes along and says, well, what if we could create a currency that's governed by math? A currency that's controlled by code and by a decentralized network instead of by humans.
Whoa. Yeah, that is a completely different way of thinking about things. So it's not even just about like a different kind of money. It's about who has the power.
Exactly.
It's huge.
It is. A lot of Bitcoin's appeal comes from this idea of individual sovereignty. Like you're in control of your own finances. It's a rejection of the status quo.
Yeah, it's like a vision of a more equitable future.
Yeah, exactly.
And it also makes you question like, what even is value? Like in the past, we've always tied value to something tangible, like gold or land or whatever.
Right. But with Bitcoin, its value isn't derived from any of those things.
It's just code.
Yeah, and its value comes from the network itself, from the rules that govern it, and really importantly, from the shared belief of its users.
It's like we're all just collectively agreeing that this thing has value.
Yeah. It's pretty wild when you think about it.
It's almost like a giant social experiment.
I like that. And we're getting to see this experiment play out in real time. It's like, will Bitcoin be adopted by the mainstream? Will it eventually replace traditional currencies? Or will it carve out its own unique little niche?
Those are some big questions.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone knows the answers yet.
It feels like we're just at the beginning of this whole thing.
Right.
But regardless of what happens with Bitcoin specifically,
Uh-huh.
I think it's already had a huge impact.
Oh, definitely.
It started this really important
It's
conversation.
making people question things.
Like, are there better ways to do things? Do we even need the current system?
Exactly. It's
Oh.
made us think about alternatives.
And it's opened up the possibility of a future where financial power is actually more evenly distributed.
I think that's a really powerful legacy for Bitcoin.
I agree. Even if it doesn't become like the main currency of the world or whatever,
Right.
it's already changed the way we think about things.
Totally.
So listeners, that brings us to the end of our deep dive on Bitcoin. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the basic technical stuff to the potential impacts and even the philosophical questions it raises.
Hopefully it's given you a good foundation to start your own Bitcoin journey.
Yeah, and hopefully it's made you a little bit curious too.
Because there's still so much to learn and explore in this space.
The world of Bitcoin is full of surprises.
Definitely.
Who knows what the future holds? But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a wild ride.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, stay curious.